We can chant and chant and chant and chant, and it will purify us, but only to such and such a level. When we need to go further, where we really need Krishna's mercy, we need Krishna's mercy all the time, but especially like Baba, we cannot reach Baba without Krishna's mercy. Impossible. No method, nothing can bring it to us. Krishna can give it to us. But Krishna will only give it when we actually show throughout our lives, at least for many years, that we want to follow that system. That we are listening with our hearts. We're not just listening with our ears, we're not just listening with our intelligence, but we're actually trying to make this weaker, trying to come to the point where we actually understand our dependence on others, and living like that, understanding the culture, living the culture. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was completely dependent on his devotees. He's the independent Supreme Personality of Godhead, but acting as a devotee, completely dependent. He was asking advice from his devotees. When he was going to South India, he was asking Nityananda, can you please allow me to go to South India? He was asking Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and all the Gaura Bhaktavrindas. He was asking, can you please, I'd like to go to South India. And when they said no, he didn't go. Or at least they didn't say no, but they said, later you should go. And then again, when later came, he said, oh, later you should go. And later came, and then later you should go. But at one point he said, no, you should go. So that's Krishna. And that's also authorities. Of course we should surrender to authorities, but we should never surrender our intelligence. We should always, like everything should be, again like Bali Maharaj, he was rejecting his authority. So if it's giving wrong advice, bad advice, handling our devotional service. But then if we go against any kind of authority, any kind of devotee, we should be very careful. Then we should ask all our other authorities. But sometimes, because like also a king, Brahmana, he's getting so many Brahmanas, so he can't follow all of them because they will give slightly different varieties of information. So it says, okay, in this matter I follow this Brahmana. So that's why he's in charge and he's getting the reactions. So in the same way, if we go against the authority, which we shouldn't normally, but if we do, we get the reaction. That's why it's so extremely dangerous. In small matters, just in small matters, if you go against authority, you get the reactions. But if you follow authority, the authority gets the reaction. Even to some degree, not blindly, but just following just for the sake of following. Yudhishthira Maharaj didn't get any bad karma for following Dhritarashtra. He was suffering going to the forest like that, but for Yudhishthira that was enjoyment. He's like a Brahmana. He was enjoying in the forest, hearing from the Brahmanas constantly. And ultimately, he became the emperor of the world. Following Krishna's instructions, you might not get it the way you like it. So there might be some anartha-nivritti. Even Yudhishthira had to go through some, you can say anartha-nivritti, he had to go through some process. And when Krishna said, okay, now it's time, now the war is there. After the war, then you become the emperor. So that's the same in our lives. Sometimes we say, oh, I'm really endeavoring, but still I do not feel I'm making progress. One thing is we are. But another thing is completely up to Krishna when he gives that progress. To what degree and of what value he gives that progress. Completely up to Krishna. So our only duty is just to follow. Just to follow Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, just to do it, but do it with the heart. If we do it whimsically, Krishna rewards us whimsically. But if we do it with the heart, Krishna will reward, but in his time, in his space, in his decision. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was following the instructions to some degree, but at one point he said, no, now you have to, please give me. He says, please give me commission. And they could understand, hey, what are we doing? We are not actually being, we are acting on authority, but on bad authority. What is the bad authority here? I know it says going against Krishna. But what is the problem? It is selfishness. So if you're a selfish authority, you're not a leader. You need to come to the point where you think more of your dependence, like Yudhishthira, like Parikshit Maharaj, thinking more of your dependence than you think of yourself. That's a leader. And such a person, easy to surrender to. But if you feel there's all these agendas there, he's doing this just to get this, or he's doing this just to manipulate, then such an authority is difficult to surrender to. So that's why we need, because we are authorities, and we should be authorities, so we need to come to the level where we think like, live Brahminically. Live Brahminically, not being attached. Your only duty is to tell. However the person uses that is completely up to that person. And that's teaching in itself, because if the person has any intelligence, will find, hey, I get a bad result from this. So maybe I should listen. But if we are stubborn, if we are stupid, if we are not using our intelligence, we can't even understand that when I'm suffering, it's due to my own past karma, or what I'm doing wrong in devotional service. That's stupidity, that we can't see the connection. So then we are not willing to listen, then we are not learning. But if we actually learn, this Devotee told me this, maybe I should just do it and see what result we get. Instead of using my own intelligence and think, this is how it should be. I think it should be like this. Then I just to follow. This is what my authority says, this is what we should do. If we have a real authority. So we should come to that level where we are that kind of authority. That actually we have that purity, where we can guide people without having any motives other than to help that person. Help that person get closer to Krishna. That's the only way to help. Krishna even had, Caitanya Mahaprabhu, he had Ramananda Raya preaching to Pradyumna Mishra. Ramananda Raya, Prabhupada mentioned, is a Grihastha Sudra. He's a Sudra, but there's more to it. But anyway, he's a Grihastha Sudra. But he's preaching to Pradyumna Mishra, who's a high-class Brahmana. Pradyumna Mishra comes, oh, please can you explain this higher knowledge to me? And Caitanya Mahaprabhu says, I can't. If I want to have knowledge of this, I go to Ramananda Raya. So you please go there. So Pradyumna Mishra, he goes there and then he Ramananda Raya, oh, he hasn't got time now, you can sit and wait. And then he finds out what Ramananda Raya was doing. He was directing naked girls, practically, in some drama. Massaging their bodies. And when Pradyumna Mishra heard that, he went back to Caitanya Mahaprabhu and said, are you sure this is an authority? And Caitanya Mahaprabhu said he can do it because he is completely pure. He has no attachment. He is such a pure personality that he can even touch a naked woman without being agitated. Like Prabhupada said, that's the difference between me and you. I can be in a room full of naked women without being influenced, can you? So that's we can see when we're really at that level, then we can associate with women. Especially as brahmacharis, but all. Otherwise that association should be restricted. Very restricted. Because otherwise it'll just so easily become subtle sex life. Because any, like, a brahmachari won't do anything physically, but even doing subtly, subtle sex life is sex life. So that's again the purity. If we have the purity, we can pray for that. So he was, Pradyumna Mishra, he was getting knowledge from a Sudra because he was at a very, very high level of devotional service. So then again, who is the authority? The one who has most knowledge of devotional service, the one who is the purest devotee. That's the authority. That's the authority. Because he knows. He's living. So again, we should, when we read all these things in Shastras, we should understand how can I come to that level? How can I follow in the footsteps of these great personalities? How can I become such a leader? It's our duty. It's our duty to Srila Prabhupada to become able to lead, first of all, ourselves on all our dependents. Because we have disciples, we will get disciples more in the future. How do we move and go on without leaders? No. The most important things, getting to the Brahminical platform. If you can do that, we are doing the highest service you can do for humanity and the highest service for Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions?
You said that in the final sense, the authority is the one who is the greatest devotee and has the biggest knowledge of devotional service. But how do you recognize that? Because it's...
Good question, because we hear it takes one to see one, to know, recognize one. So until we know, we just follow authority, because Krishna is giving, through Krishna's giving, Krishna's empowering, Krishna's taking care of this movement. Prabhupada is still taking care of this movement. So we should just depend upon our authorities, the advice they give us. They will say, the authority will say, either the temple president will say, you follow my instructions or you follow his instructions. So then we can understand.
But for example, in the case of accepting spiritual master, no one would actually say that he's a pure devotee, so accept him. That's
about himself, you mean?
No, even about others.
Yes, definitely. That's what we hear so many places in Shastra. You go to him, you learn from him. If you're not here from me, you go to him. Maitreya Muni is sending, Uddhava is sending, Vidura to Maitreya Muni. You go and hear from him.
But I mean, in ISKCON, nobody will say, this guru is the pure devotee, you should accept him as spiritual master.
Okay, yeah, well, like Shiksha Guru?
GPCs,
GPCs, temple presidents, authorities like that.
Yeah, but not a specific one. They say accept any of the gurus.
No, they can give you they can give you an authority, a Shiksha Guru. You follow that personality. Diksha Guru is different because that one is chosen. And actually one is not allowed to propagate it. But Shiksha Guru is definitely.
But also gave the instruction that you can accept as a guru someone you can bow down to in so many ways. And if you consider a devotee advanced compared to yourself in so many ways, you can be accepted as a guru. You should be able to have that feeling about him that he's advanced compared to myself. He can teach me things. I wonder why Vidura is saying to Dhritarashtra that his father has been killed. Is he referring to Bhishma Dev or the
no, Dhritarashtra's father.
Yeah.
That's
Vyasadeva, right?
no, Tringada. Tangada.
Dhritarashtra's father.
Yeah, of course, the Dhritarashtra is born from the maid servant, the Amba Amalika, from Vyasadeva. Yeah. So I think he's referring to the family relationship, because Vyasadeva will live forever.
Yeah.
Practically. I always just thought about it of like Caitanya. That's when Santanu, when he left, there was only Vishnu to rule, but he could not because of the Santanus with this physical and the whole thing. So he could not rule. And because Satyavati didn't get any offspring, he didn't get children, because he was married. No, so not Satyavati, but what was the daughter? So the daughter of Satyavati.
She had a son, right?
She had a son, but
he died young.
He died young. So they got no. There was no one else, and Bhishma did, because Chintagata, and so they were the sons of who? Not of Santanu, right? But of
Candra is a brother of Santanu, who was
killed by an Gandharva who has the same name.
Yeah. But what is the other brother? There was two. There was two sons there. Are you sure it's the brother of Santana? Caitanya and one more.
No, not Vichitra Virya.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Vichitra Virya. Yeah.
Oh, that's their brothers.
Yeah, their brothers. So who was their mother? But anyway, they didn't get Caitanya and Vichitra Virya. They didn't get any children. Vichitra Virya died from a terrible disease, and Caitanya was killed by the heavenly Gandharva Caitanya. So they didn't get any children. So that, in that sense, you can say that was the point when Satyavati, she called for Vyasadeva, and then she was pleading with Bhishma. You gave your promise, but that was like, it was to me for my father, and now I release you from that promise. Because this is a higher principle, you need to see that the dynasty will go on. What Vishnu says, the sun may become cold, and give so many examples, but Vishnu will never go back on his word. So he simply can't. And then she thinks, Satyavati, she thinks about, oh, Vyasadeva, he told me I could always just think about him and he will come. So she calls Vyasadeva in her meditation, and Vyasadeva comes there, and then she gives birth to Dhritarashtra and Banu and Vidura.
But because Vyasadeva is the substitute for the husbands of these girls, therefore that Vichitra Virya or the other one is the father.
To some degree, you can say, yeah. That's how I understand it. Good question.
One of the main points of the lectures were leadership and how important it is to establish this Brahmana-Kshatriya relationship. So my question is that we're training Brahmanas in ISKCON, but are we also training Kshatriyas?
To some degree, because really Kshatriyas will be the one becoming leaders, the leaders of our movement and temple presidents like that. Should be some kind of Kshatriya power. So we have leadership training in ISKCON. There's our leadership Sangha, or leadership Sangha every year in Mayapur, I think it is. And you have European leadership meetings once a year. There's a leadership course you can take, how to actually become a good leader. So to some degree, and to another degree, yes, from Shastra. We hear mostly about the Kshatriyas in Shastra. Actually, we hear very little about the Brahmanas, comparatively. So there are very few Brahmanas, and that's just how it is. Even in a Vedic society, very few, relatively few Brahmanas, but lot more Brahmanas, or Kshatriyas. So that will always be there, and then a lot more Vaishyas than Kshatriyas, and a lot more Sudras then. So it goes like that. There's more Sudras or lower, and then fewer Vaishyas, fewer Kshatriyas, and even fewer Brahmanas. So we will need all. It's a whole like the Vaishyas are the leg, the Sudras are the leg, the Vaishyas are the belly, and the Kshatriyas are the arms, and the Brahmanas are the head. So we need the whole. We cannot live without, at least we cannot live without a head. And we will not live very comfortably and not be very effective without legs, especially without stomach and arms. So the whole thing is there, the structure of society, the society body, we need all. But most important for several reasons is the Brahmanas. One thing is the most important because they are most rare, especially in Kali Yuga. They are practically non-existent outside the holy circles. And because they have the highest knowledge, and the head is the most important. So we need to train all classes of men, and that's Varna Ashram society. But Prabhupada was putting very much emphasis on developing Brahmanas. And he says in Nature of Devotion that it is actually possible. You can say, give the example of bell metal can be turned into gold. With the right chemical procedure, you can turn bell metal into gold. So Prabhupada give that example of you can have a person who has some Brahminical inclination. If you give him the proper training and association, he will become a first-class Brahmin. Prabhupada even says future generations, the sons of devotees will be able to light fire by mantras. So that's about it.
It's stated in, I think it's in the end of 5th canto, that there's a certain hell for a Sudra who doesn't aspire to become a Brahmana.
Okay.
Quite sure it was.
Yeah, I can do that.
So I was just thinking, is like from Sudra to Vaishya to Kshatriya and to Brahmana, is there like a natural evolution, or do you go like directly from Sudra to Brahmana, or do you go through these other steps?
The power of devotional service is so extremely potent that you can go directly if you take to devotional service. But normally, like the whole thing in the Vedic societies, if you're not a devotee, a pure devotee, or endeavoring to become a pure devotee, then you go through the step-to-step process.
Life
after life, yeah, often. But if you're a perfect Sudra, you can go back to Godhead by being a Sudra. If you're a right Sudra. But you need to be in the Varna Ashram system. That's there. But it's much easier on the higher. It's because Sudras is by nature they're degraded. That's the nature of Sudras. To some degree. Even though they're civilized, they have the tendency towards degradation. That's why Prabhupada says that you should never give a Sudra salary, because you will misuse. You will misuse the money. So he's towards sense gratification. That's what it means. Sudra means one who laments, and it just goes for sense gratification. So there's all different kinds of attachment in the different varnas. Of course, Vaishya is money and power, especially money, but influence. Kshatriya is power, and even more influence. And Brahmanas, of course, knowledge and detachment. So in the higher you get in the varnas, the easier it is in that sense.
And if we don't speak about like bhakti, but just like within the modes, is it like a very, very expert Sudra is almost a Vaishya, and a very expert Vaishya is almost a Kshatriya, so there's like
these fine lines in between. Yeah.
Oh.
Even if you hear about Ramana and Roy, I told the story about Ramana and Roy being a Sudra, but he's what is the technical term? Kayasta. He's from the Kayasta family. That's a Sudra, but a very elevated Sudra. He's Ramana and Roy is a governor, and a very, very influential personality, and very refined and cultured and civilized. So that's in the higher level of Sutra. And he is very close to being Vaishya. And at that level, he's Vaishnava, but at that level, you're very close to being a Vaishya. And that goes for more of them. I also be here Shraddha to Prema. All these, there's these
missing links.
Yeah, there's these junctions. Small junctions in between, like scales of gradually becoming more and more of more and more on bhajan, more and more on shrine, more and more on nishta, or becoming more and more, and at one point you're becoming so much, and then you go to the mid level. And then you start on the lower level and you go higher and higher. So same principle. Go Krishna,
No, I'll just say that the classifications of the four varnas are also very much connected with the modes. Right? So if you, as a Shudra, involved in spiritual activities, you will be cleansed from the lower modes. You'll be cleansed from Tamagun and ultimately Rajagun, and you will be in Sattva and Sudha Sattva. So the propensities, the Shudra propensities, will gradually be dissolved. Or the Vaishya dependency or tendencies will be dissolved by Para Brahman or Shabda Brahman. You are not a Shudra or whatever. So these shells or these conditionings will disappear. And by that you would transgress the varnas also.
And mainly on the level of association, right? Because when you get at least a higher level of sutra or whatever, then you will also tend to associate a little more with that kind of personalities and even the devices. You'll get an inclination. Thank you very much. Grandaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Prabhupada.